Hello again, everyone. It's Bob Martin, the RCSubGuy with the Nautilus Dry Docks, here with a really unique boat. This is an Oberon class from Britain. Let's take a closer look. So these Oberon class boats were built by the British Navy between 1957 and 1974 or something like that, and there was 27 of them built all together. This particular boat is based off of the OTW Designs hull kit in 1/48 scale, which makes it a very significant 74 inches in overall length. Now, a little bit of a background to this specific boat. It was originally commissioned by a customer of mine, and I passed that off to a very talented builder by the name of Steve Hodges. He finished out the boat, and he's integrated some really amazing features that we're going to get into here in a little bit. Finished the boat out. It went all the way to Australia and eventually found its way back to the dry docks, where we are now offering it once again. Let's take a closer look at the hull, and then we'll start talking about the control systems that make this thing go. So one of the most distinctive features is this big sonar dome on the front of the boat that is almost immediately recognizable as these Oberon or O-class boats. Heading aft here, you can see these vertically folding bow planes, and these are, of course, in this functional boat, completely functional. The entire hull is manufactured from fiberglass and has some really beautiful details in the deck, as you can see there. Another distinguishing feature of these O-class boats were these massive sails on the top. You can see they housed a large number of different periscopes, masts, and sensor arrays. These are also fully functional, and we'll get into that in a moment as well. As you can see, looking at the boat, the hull is exceptionally streamlined. This was one of the faster boats, and it actually had a top speed of about 17 knots submerged. Diesel electric boat. This had a lot of use during the Cold War. Dual shafts on the back there. You can see those beautiful brass props. And the wonderful thing about this design, as you've heard me say many times before, is the fact that these control surfaces, the rudders and the rear dive planes, are directly aft of the propellers, which means you get instantaneous response to pitch and yaw inputs from your transmitter. Powering everything is this OTW dive module. It's dual shaft, as you can see in the back there. This is just a neat thing. It's a little tip for people. These desiccant packages help remove moisture from the air. So if for whatever reason you're in a humid climate, those will help pull the moisture from the air inside and stop condensation from occurring on the outside of your cylinder. One of the things that Steve did for this boat was a modification that I've done a number of times, and that is he vented this ballast tank. Now, I know Bob Dimmack is not a huge fan of this. He doesn't like people messing with his masterpiece, but when you do this, you turn this ballast system from a high-pressure pump system into a low-pressure pump system. And what I mean by that is you can see here this wobble pump that runs through an electronic solenoid valve that pulls water in from the outside and pumps it into the ballast chamber. Now, in a typical application, if this was sealed, this would pressure up the cylinder, or the compartment here, the ballast tank, until it was about 2/3 of the way full. And that's when the pump would no longer be able to overcome the pressure in the tank. Now that means basically you're losing about 30 or 40% of the capacity of this ballast tank. In an effort to keep it small and to maximize that ballast tank, Steve elected to vent it, and that actually vents through the little snorkel in the back of the sail here. In practical application, what ends up happening, the pump will fill this all with water until it reaches this, and then it will actually spray water out behind the boat. It kind of looks like a rooster tail or a little jet. That's a visual indication that your ballast tank is completely full. I actually really like that visual reference telling you that your ballast tank is completely full and that you should, in theory, be in full submerged trim at that time. You can see here a couple of other things. There's some brackets that are used to hold this down, and we'll get into that here momentarily. And then everything is controlled through this 10-channel high-frequency 2.4 gigahertz radio link transmitter. It goes into an 8-channel receiver in the submarine, in the watertight compartment. As a 2.4 gigahertz boat, the antenna does need to be above the surface at all times when you're operating it. One of the neat things that Steve has done, and I haven't really played enough with, is the idea of having a quick disconnect for the antenna right here on the front face of the cylinder, so that that antenna can remain installed in the upper hull at all times. Now, there's another reason that he did this, and you'll see this when I talk about the operational periscopes, which are utterly amazing. But that was one of the fundamental reasons that antenna needs to remain installed in the upper hull at all times. Now that we've talked about all of that, let's install this watertight cylinder in the boat. We'll show you how it sits, how it works, get everything working, and then we'll dive deep into those forward dive planes and the periscopes, because I know you want to see those. So one of the first things that you're going to want to do is install the battery. Now, this particular boat was designed around a 12 volt 5 amp hour sealed lead acid battery, which is very common for use in larger boats. Reason being is space is not at such a premium, so you might, if you're going to add weight low in the boat, you might as well make it a battery. To that end, what you're going to end up doing with the power leads facing forward, we're going to spread this Velcro apart. We're going to line up the leading edge of the battery with the forward edge of this tray, making sure that it's centered in the boat, and then we're going to simply tighten it down with this Velcro, and now it's locked into place. You can see this waterproof connector, and that will ultimately connect to the watertight cylinder here as well. With that done, we're going to grab our cylinder. Installation is actually really easy. What we're going to do is line up our dog bone connectors with our drive shafts. So those are slipped into place. Now our drive shafts are basically connected. Grab it at the front here by this knurled nut and just lower it into place. Now it is down, nestled, in position, ready to go. Since we're here, we can grab our rear linkages, and those are now locked into place as well. Then we're going to grab our little lockdown bulkheads. You can see some stainless bolts there, marked R for rear, S for starboard, and you just kind of drop these in place, and they bolt down to the bulkheads. You'll note on the top of these bulkheads, there are little holes for more screws, and that is what ultimately holds the upper deck down nice and solid to the lower hull. So, now that that's done, what we're going to do, I'm going to go grab the upper hull, and we're going to make up some connections. Before I do, I just want to show you what we're going to be doing. So take a closer look up front here. There's 9 ports on the front here, and each one of these 3 pertain to a different function. So there's your periscopes, your retracts, and your forward dive planes. And the upper hull is going to have little connectors that get inserted into each one of those. So let's go ahead and grab that. Fortunately, Steve was smart enough to engineer these in such a manner that they are long enough to make connections to the watertight cylinder without having to make a bracket or anything like that for the upper hull. So we got each one of our cable groups. You got your signal wire, your positive wire, and your ground wire. You just look at the different ports there, match them up, and basically install them one at a time. All right, everything is in place. We've got yellow, 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 red, 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 and black, black, black. Now we are going to turn on our radio. And to power up the boat, we just simply make up our power connection. You can see those bow planes cycled. And we can start playing with all the different features. So let's start with the basic ones, the boring ones. Right stick, horizontal, we've got our rudder control. We've got nice deflection there. On the back, we've got a slider switch, and that's the stern plane override. So you can see stern planes working, and of course, those are also on an automatic pitch controller as well. So this boat will automatically try to maintain pitch. Now, just as a note, we were out to the pond submerged. This boat likes to have just a little bit of up planes on the back to drive the nose down. Once you get that dialed in with that slider on the back, it's hands-off, hands-free operation at Periscope for as long as you want to hang out there. It's pretty awesome. We have our throttles in forward and reverse. And then we get to our fun options. So in this particular case, the boat would be in surfaced mode. The periscopes are retracted, the bow planes are retracted, and then we're going to go ahead and extend our bow planes, and then we've got full control over them. We can retract them again, and they're completely locked out. I have no way to actuate those. Nothing's going to break, nothing's going to bind. So that is the lockout system. It was handled through a relay block on the inside, which was a really cool thing. And then he's also used a go slow device, which is what gives you this nice, stately, slow extension and retraction of the bow planes. Really, really slick. Which brings us to the operational periscopes, which I am actually really impressed with, and Steve should be very proud of. I want you to watch the periscopes as they raise, and in particular, this housing right here that houses the 2.4 gigahertz antenna. So as you can see, this antenna is moving up and down at a different rate than all of the others. This is the antenna for our 2.4 gigahertz, and it's the highest in the boat, which gives you the biggest flexibility for depth when you're operating the boat. It's actually quite brilliant. The other one to pay attention to is this one right here. That was the that little snorkel intake that I was telling you about. This is where the ballast tank expels and intakes air for the ballast system. So in order to fully surface, this does need to be exposed. Now the whole boat is ballasted in such a manner that it will float at about 1 inch of sail above the water. So worst case scenario, something happens, it will simply float back up to the surface and you can blow your ballast at that time. Now that you've seen the outside of these, I know everybody wants to know how they work. Now's the time to insert your quarters. All right, let's take a look. We're gonna flip this up and show you how it works. Let's start at the front. Let's talk about these folding bow planes. Again, just a really unique solution for this assembly. So if we take a look at what we've got underneath here, we've got waterproofed servos. We've got a mini servo and a full-sized servo in here. This one controls the retracts. This one controls the pitch of the bow planes. So first off, we'll talk about this one, and you can't see it very well, and they're kind of hard to get out. But what you've got on there, on the other side is a wheel, and one side of it pushes out this side, and one side of it pushes out this side. So as that servo spins, it pushes and pulls these control rods, and you can see they connect to this little arm on the bottom of the dive plane, and that is what actuates the dive plane. So let's take a look at that in action. There you go. So you can see that linkage rod pushing out on a little ball joint there and retracting. So now that they're extended, the entire assembly is what moves to give you your pitch control. A really slick system, and of course it's done that way, then all of the linkages for the extension and retraction are always part of the actual dive plane, so you don't need to worry about movement and angles and binding and all sorts of things like that. So a very slick system. Obviously the secret sauce being waterproofed servos, and then the integration of the extension and retraction servo with the entire bow plane assembly. All right, let's move on to periscopes. Same kind of idea, waterproof servo. Now the secret sauce here is in this linkage arm. So you can see we've got a long arm. This is about 1.5 inches, and then this one is probably 2 or 2.25 inches out here. And the reason we've got two connections is how that 2.4 gigahertz antenna extends and retracts at a different rate than the rest of the assembly. So the main periscope assembly is attached to this, and the antenna is attached to this. So you can actually see this is the 2.4 gigahertz antenna. And then as this moves, it slips through this tube, which is also more tube through here, just like the brakes on your bike. Exactly that way. So let's see that in action, starting at the front here. So we're going to extend the periscopes. So you can see the distance that this traveled was much more than what this traveled, and that's how that one periscope moves further. So if we follow this linkage, we've got this big beefy brass rod that goes up into the base of the periscope assembly, and then our 2.4 gigahertz that flies up and shoots straight up through that one periscope, that one mast. Now, you can't see it in here. I'm going to see if for this video I can get either a video clip or a photo of this assembly, but the way it works is actually a scissor lift. So looking in there, you can actually see the scissors there, those crossing bars. So if I actuate the periscopes now, you'll see that they kind of collapse back down. Last thing to note on this upper hull, this is the connection for the ballast intake, and that goes to the top of the ballast tank. And that is right here. So you just connect that rubber hose right to the top of the tank. And then the last thing you need to do is connect your 2.4 gigahertz antenna to the front of the cylinder, and you're off to the races. Just a few comments for you about the performance of this boat that we literally had out to the pond today for her testing. Just like the full-sized counterpart, this boat is actually very, very speedy. It cuts through the water just like a knife. And as I mentioned, which is not surprising, it has very good response to pitch inputs from the stern planes and also rudder inputs, both of those control surfaces being directly behind those propellers. So immediately after you give it some throttle, you're going to see response from the boat. Maintenance of periscope depth is exceptionally easy. It is one-handed or no-handed operation of the boat. It'll maintain periscope depth as long as you want, even through a turn, which is actually really surprising. Typically these subs will want to drop by the stern and poke their nose out of the water in a hard turn, but I did not see that. Some things of note to see, which I thought was really interesting. In a hard turn, the boat will lean to the outside of the turn. I hadn't really seen that before, and it didn't even really happen only at high speed. I don't know if it's a design quirk of the full-size boat because of the hydrodynamics of the hull, or if it's just a weird thing about this particular build, but she tended to lean out going around corners. In a high-speed turn fully submerged, she wants to do the opposite. We've got a nice big flattish sail, so she wants to bank into the turn. Really doesn't affect enjoyment at all. It's just a design quirk or an operational quirk of this boat. All in all, it was exceptionally fun to operate. It was absolutely flawless, worked perfectly the first time, which is pretty rare for an RC submarine. Usually you've got things to tweak. But we're really happy with this, and we're excited to find it a new home. Hopefully you enjoyed this video of this 1/48th scale O-class Oberon submarine, put out by OTW Designs, built by Steve Hodges, refitted, refurbished, repainted, retrimmed by your friends at the Nautilus Dry Docks. If you like what you see, please do like and subscribe. It helps us out here a lot. If you have questions or comments, drop them down below, or for a faster response, hit me up by email direct, bob@nautilusdrydocks.com. I would love to hear from you. And with that, we're going to let you go. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.